If you consider the subjects and themes that I discuss frequently on this channel, you realize it was inevitable that I would do videos on The Matrix. No pun intended.
Inevitable.
Yeah, seeing that The Matrix 4 will be releasing in a couple months, I figured now was the most appropriate time to start doing videos on the series. Doing videos on The Matrix now will not only build both my hype and your hype for the new movie, but by celebrating in greater numbers, we can appreciate the unparalleled brilliance that can be found in this series with even greater enthusiasm. I won't be focusing on the movies in this video, however. I just wanted to give you guys the opportunity to pitch me some ideas about what you'd like me to cover. You can do that in the comment section below. I do read your comments, and sometimes your comments are so good that they inspire entire videos on their own. So, if you are a Matrix fan, please leave your ideas down below. Before I get to the main focus of this video, I'd like to say a couple of things about the Matrix video games. Specifically, Enter the Matrix Online, and The Matrix Path of Neo. Prior to the release of these games, the hype level was off the chain, and understandably so. The world of The Matrix is so ripe for a great video game. Who doesn't want to slow down time and shoot bad guys, leap across buildings, or hell, learn to fly like Neo? I was so desperate to do those things as a kid that when I played Enter the Matrix and Path of Neo, I was more than willing to look past its glaring flaws. As long as I could go into bullet time and do backflips, I would be as content as the Oracle is when she eats candy.
I love candy.
Unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to play The Matrix Online when it was around, but apparently some people were so in love with the lore and the mechanics of The Matrix that they played this MMO right up until it got taken offline. I bring up this collective love for bullet time and gravity defying because, well, if you look past that, these games aren't very well put together. Sure, they have some cool stuff like the sound design and the bullet time works okay, but you frequently come across blocky graphics, clunky combat, and a frustrating camera. This isn't an uncommon opinion, by the way. When these games released, most reviewers and players had the same complaints. Don't get me wrong, I'm prone to look back on these games with tinted glasses just like you are. But have you ever tried playing Enter the Matrix or Path of Neo recently? I'd be shocked if you loved it as much now as you did back in 2003. Playing them now drives me nuts. With that said, there is a gem of a moment that occurs towards the end of the Path of Neo. In my opinion, this moment could be considered one of the more profound moments in the history of games. Unfortunately, the brilliance of this moment can be easily missed, because it happens so quickly and makes zero sense the first time you experience it. But if you go back, pay close attention, and meditate on what is happening, you will gain a newfound appreciation for the brilliance of the Matrix series, just like I did. Quickly, before I address this moment, I'll give a quick summary of what happens in the Path of Neo for those that didn't play it. The game, obviously, covers the events of all three movies, specifically the ones that involved Neo. Towards the end of the game, you fight Agent Smith, just like Neo does in The Matrix Revolutions. In both the game and the movie, there's a scene where both are fighting in a concrete pit in the rain. At one point, Neo lands an attack on Agent Smith that drives him into the ground. In the movie, Agent Smith rises up from the ground and shouts, "This is my world, and then proceeds to kick the crap out of Neo. However, in the video game, this doesn't happen. Instead, the game cuts to an area that looks a lot like the construct from the first movie. Two chairs appear, and then two digitized sprites walk on screen.
Hi, I'm Andy Wachowski.
And I'm Larry Wachowski.
Or rather, these are the digital projections of our mental selves.
The directors of the Matrix movies break the fourth wall and address the gamer directly. They do this because something is about to happen that does not occur in the original movie trilogy, and they wanted to explain why. Recall the end of the third movie where Neo dies, Smith is annihilated by the machines, and the Matrix is rebooted. The directors, who were involved in the creation of the Path of Neo, felt that using the movie's ending in the game would be, well, to use their own words,
Lame.
Really lame.
As a consequence of this feeling, they asked the game developers to change the ending into something more befitting of a game. The developers agreed and made Neo fight a gigantic megasmith to conclude the game. Now, fourth wall breaks, if done tastefully and sensibly, can be profound in their own right, like when Psycho Mantis broke the fourth wall in the first Metal Gear Solid game. But the act of breaking the fourth wall isn't the profundity that I was initially referring to. Before the directors tell us about the Galactus-sized Gigasmith that we're about to fight, one of them gives greater justification to this decision. It is within this justification that we find that gem of brilliance.
You see, at this point in the story, Neo stands on the verge of Satori, ready to resolve the paradox of choice and choicelessness, of free will versus fate, but that can only be achieved through an act of surrender, which occurs after he has abandoned the perspectival nature of truth, accepting the totality of present consciousness, which ultimately allows an evolutionary transition, transcending the Cartesian Dilemma through the emergence of delimited spirit, which then provides the world with a choice of a third path, the path of Neo, the path of P.
Did you catch all that? Yeah. Remember what I said about it happening so quickly and making zero sense? I was being more literal than you thought. I understand why the game encourages you to ignore what was just said. After all, the explanation wasn't the focus of this fourth wall break. I just wish that back in the day, before YouTube, there was a better way to listen to what was being said. But now that YouTube is around, we can watch this moment again and again and gain a greater understanding for it. That's what I did, and I'd like to provide that explanation for you today. In this paragraph, you will find a wonderful summation of Neo's role as the One, and how his role is reflected in real-life metaphysics, specifically Buddhism and Christianity. Let's go line by line. First, Lana Wachowski says that Neo stands on the verge of Satori. Satori, in Buddhism, means enlightenment. Enlightenment, of course, is the ultimate goal of Buddhism, where one can achieve freedom from the restraints of the physical world. In order to do this, he needs to resolve the paradox of choice and choicelessness, of free will versus fate. These two subjects are prominent themes in the original Matrix movies, particularly with the sequels. Are humans slaves to their fate? Are they merely the sum of all that has come before? Or do they possess some degree of free will? If you're a machine, or a program in the Matrix, you're inclined to believe in fate, and eschew free will. This is evidenced by the words of the Merovingian in The Matrix Reloaded, when he discusses cause and effect, the fundamental law of physical reality. Everything that occurs in reality is the result of a prior cause, including humans. Humans are the summation of billions of years of evolution, starting with our immediate ancestors, going back all the way to the beginning of time. Our DNA is the product of that evolution. Our DNA is what directs our function, just like AI directs a program. In this way, the machines and humans are no different. Neither can be the initial cause of their actions and thus cannot have free will. Even if you make a choice, it is only the illusion of choice, because the choice you made, once again, is largely influenced by prior causes. But is this to say that free will is completely null and void? Well, depending on who you talk to, the answer might be yes or no. But what about the directors of the movie? Well, we can't say for certain, but the path of Neo might provide us with a clue. The sentence highlighted says that Neo is about to resolve the paradox of choice and choicelessness, of free will versus fate. But how would that be possible? You have to achieve a state of mind that is not bound by these earthly, physical dichotomies. According to the directors, Neo will do this through an act of surrender, which occurs after he has abandoned the perspectival nature of truth. Perspectival means relating to perspective. When Lana says perspectival nature of truth, she is referring to the fact that the human perception of truth is constrained by our physical bodies. If we weren't constrained by the physical world, then we could develop a greater understanding or appreciation of every kind of truth. In respect to the issue of free will versus fate, the truth of that matter would become irrelevant, because we would overcome it. The issue of free will versus fate is only relevant to mortals, and not the enlightened. Again, to achieve that enlightenment, Neo must surrender his body and accept death. To do that, he needs to not only abandon the false mortal dichotomy of free will versus fate, but also accept the totality of present consciousness. Neo possesses the totality of present consciousness because he is the One. He's a messiah on account of his abilities. He only needs to do one thing before he can go beyond the totality of present consciousness, before his body can ascend to that higher state. And that is die. Now think for a moment about what other godlike being had to die before he could transcend the flesh and reach a higher state. If you're having a hard time figuring it out, the directors reference this other godlike being in the same scene from the video game. Jesus.
The Jesus thing.
Jesus, like Neo, was the totality of present consciousness. They are the highest ideals. The only way both Neo and Jesus could transcend their mortal flesh was if they both surrendered to the reality of death. Once they did that, they could achieve that quote-unquote evolutionary transition, the transition from unenlightened mortality to enlightened eternity. In this state, the spirit would be delimited, meaning the limits that were placed on it before were now gone. The consciousness or spirit that Neo and Jesus possess would emerge beyond mortal limitations and achieve Satori. This emergence, this transition, would not be a full validation of free will or fate, but a full abandonment of the dichotomy altogether, in favor of a third way. That third way would be the path of Neo, the path of peace. Video games are still a relatively nascent medium. Compared to the vast majority of video games, only a small percentage of them have moments that make you think, that transform your perspective. I like to give credit to those moments when I come across them, even when they are played off as jokes. In regards to this particular moment, I learned something that I never would have learned from the Matrix movies, what with all the convoluted things that happen in the sequels. I likely never would have learned it from a textbook either. What this moment taught me was that there are other ways to look at reality beyond the rigid structures that other people set for us. Maybe there is a way of perceiving reality where the issue of free will is irrelevant. Then again, maybe there isn't. Either way, the mere idea is a profound one, and I found it in an unlikely place. There is one other aspect to this conversation that I glossed over for the sake of time and clarity. It's where Lana references the Cartesian Dilemma. If you want an explanation for that, look in the description box below. Remember to hit that like button, by the way, if you like this video. It's free and easy to do. Plus, when you hit the like button, it tells the YouTube algorithm that this video and all the other videos on my channel are worth watching. In other words, it helps me out a lot. So please, hit the like button. If you don't want to miss my other Matrix related content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also, if you like the work I'm doing here, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put a link to Patreon in the description box below. Until my next video, just remember to
free your mind.